Hi everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name is Maria, and I'm here to help you make more quilts in less time with less stress. So, it's been an interesting couple of weeks here at the Spitalnik house. So let's get started with our tip of the day. If this is your first time here, just so you know, I'm a professional organizer by trade, so we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But I do always try to start with a tip, either quilting related or household related or productivity related, something along those lines. So today I'm actually very quilt related because I want to talk about used pins, needles, and rotary cutter blades. Now I keep the cases that rotary cutter blades come in. I'll label them new or old, and then I put the blades in there. However, I know a lot of people don't, and a lot of the blades I've been getting lately, the cases don't exist. They're basically just a piece of cardboard and then a plastic shell that covers it. So let's talk about safe disposal. Okay. I was surprised when my husband got his cancer diagnosis and he had to have injections that they told him he did not need a sharps container since the needle went back up into the syringe. But they told him that all you needed was like a laundry tub or something with a thick plastic, fill it up to half or 3/4 full, and you could go ahead and tape it shut and put it in the regular trash. So for my sewing room, what I've used for years, but didn't realize you could use for medical stuff too, are Parmesan or Romano cheese containers. The 45-degree blade can slide right through here. At worst, if it doesn't fit with the version you have, you can unscrew it, put the blade in. But what I really like is that because it's got the holes for shaking, you can just drop your pins in there, and even if it's open, if it falls off the table or whatever, you're not going to lose very many. So you're not going to be playing, can I find the pins in the carpet with my feet game, which is something I do quite a lot. So, recommendation is the next time you finish a Parmesan or a Romano cheese container, go ahead and save it. In fact, we just emptied this, so I washed it. It's still damp inside. I'm going to be leaving it open on my countertop just to make sure it's completely dry. I'm putting in rusty pins, bent pins, dull needles, etc. So does it matter if they get more rusty? No, but I don't want to grow mold either. So that's why I'm going to do that. And so I really recommend. It's free because you've already had the cheese that came out of it. It's a really good product, and it's nice and thick. This is not easy to crush. I can do it, but it's not super easy. If you don't eat cheese and you do eat honey, I know a lot of vegans that will eat honey because as sustainably done beehives, there's still plenty of food for the bees. They only take the excess. If you have any of those honey bears that honey comes in, they also have a singular hole in the top that's a great size for pins, even if they're the big glass ones or the big plastic ones. Even the floral heads will fit through some of those. They fit beautifully through these. So, anyway, that's our tip for today. Alright, let's get caught up on a few things. So, these are the flowers for my grandmother's flower garden I was able to do in the last couple of weeks. Really, it's closer to the last month because I had to not only finish the flowers, but the arcs, and then sew the arc to the flower. So this is about a month's worth because, of course, I'm doing everything else that I need to do. But I also thought you might like to see where I currently am on the whole project. So these are not sewn together, but these are all of the flowers with arcs that are done. The next thing, of course, is going to be, once I have them all, will be to assemble them into rows and then the rows into quilts. Into the quilt. So this is a king-size quilt with a 10-inch drop on all three sides and a pillow tuck. So I need 289 flowers, 289 arcs just for the main part of the quilt, and then the top and the side are going to need additional blocks, additional white hexagons in order to square it up. So just to let you know where I stand in the process, I just counted these up today. I have Um, 200, sorry, I need 289. I have 64 flowers over here. These are the ones I just showed you on the wall, plus the 12 that I just did. Uh, Plus, I have 80 of the flowers sewn. So for the flowers, I have 156 completely sewn, which puts me just over half, 54%. The arcs, I only have 25% because the plan is that I take the arcs with me when I travel, and I've been doing some traveling, but I've also had some injuries, so I haven't been able to sew as much. And the last trip I took and the next trip I take, I'm going to be driving across country. So I'm going to be driving to Indianapolis. So all day driving means I don't have the ability with my hands to sew that night. So I'm going to lose some more days then. Now the goal is just to do one flower, one arc, or assemble the two together, one a day, which would make this be approximately a 3-year project. That's my minimum goal on a week. I'm instead trying to do it much quicker. I'm hoping to get it done in about a year and a half to get the top pieced, but we'll see what happens. It's not the kind of project that I'm overly stressing about because I know what's coming up in my calendar and I know that time is at a premium. And so some projects have to be set aside. But I still feel pretty good that I have about a quarter of the arcs done and about half the flowers done. And I started this. I had made all of the hexagons in the past, and I had made the flowers into pairs before January. But it's really since January that I've been putting the most into it in order to get it done. So it's really only been 6 months. So I don't feel too bad about where I stand at the moment. Okay. The last time that we met, I was telling you that I went through my drawer of 2 pieces. So these are pairs of things that have been sewn together or strip sets that were left over. And so what I've done is if the strip set was short or I didn't have another use for it, I turned it into 4 patches. So I got all of these sewn in the last couple of weeks. There's several hundred in this box. It doesn't look like that, but there are. Now they are all different sizes. Some of them are teeny weeny, and some of them fill the box. But for the most part, they tend to be in the 2.5, 3-inch size. So these are going to go into my drawer over here for 4 patches. When I'm completely done, I'll take a look at where I stand at that point, and then do I continue to have a 2-patch drawer? Or am I going to make a concerted effort to only have the 4 patches? So when I finish a project, am I going to go ahead and put those 4 patches into, cut them up and get them into my Leader and Ender box for sewing from the get-go? But I also have 2 very large drawers of orphan blocks. So once I'm done with my 2s, which is going to be fairly soon. I don't have that many left to go ahead and cut out. When I'm done with that, then I'm going to be going through my orphan blocks and seeing what I can make out of those. Now, I am planning on leaving the Grandmother's Flower Garden quilt, that's this one, on the wall as much as possible, but I am going to come to a point where there's no more room on the design wall. Now I do have an extra piece of design wall, which you can see there. Right now it's just leaning up against the shelves, and so I might take those down and use that as an extender as well. In order to have enough flowers for my quilt, it will more than cover this design wall. And the design wall is floor to ceiling in the entire length of this wall, just because it's so big in both dimensions. When I have enough of the flowers and everything sewn, then what I'll do is I'll put up 1/4 at a time and go ahead and lay that out, take pictures so that when I put the next quarter up I don't have like a lot of purples together or something. And I'm going to do it that way. It'll be a lot easier than try to do the whole thing all at once. But it is more inspiring when you can see the whole thing. You can see how much you've done. So anyway, so I'll be working on that. Now we also have our block of the month. Those are the 5 we've done so far. But it's summer. I know it's summer, and I know a lot of you are busy. So our next 2 blocks are going to be fairly simple. Okay? So the one for this month you can do with templates, which I give you. You can do English paper piecing, because you use the same templates, or you can do paper piecing, and that's the way that I did this block. It took me almost no time, because there's 4 pieces to each quarter of the block, so 16 pieces total. It just flew by. This is our next block. Okay, it's an interwoven star. Now, a lot of times you'll see these with either a white or a black background and then very bold colors here. Pick any 4 different fabrics you like. It's kind of hard to tell, because 2 of those look a lot alike in the camera, but they're actually relatively different when you see them in person. And so this is going to be our block. Okay, so let me put this on this side. This side? Nope, this side. Sorry. For those of you who don't do YouTube, the streaming program that I have that lets this be possible actually reverses everything. So if I reach to my left, when I look at it on my screen, it's heading to the right, and then it puts things back the other way later. It's odd. So, okay, so here's our block. All right. So let's talk about how you're going to do it. If you go onto the website, StashBlasterQuilts.com, right? StashBlasterQuilts.com. At the top, if you click on the Annuals tab, and then 2024, you'll have all the blocks that we've done so far, which are these, right here, these 5. Okay? And you will also, in the next couple of days, find this one, number 6, the interwoven star. In that folder is not only the templates and the foundation paper piecing, but there's also a page with instructions, and it has today's date and 2 weeks from now for the YouTube channel. So if at any point you want to go back and watch one of the older ones, you can see the video that corresponds with that star. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to move this and not make anybody sick. So I'm going to move it before I click over to it. And I'm going to hope that this is the right orientation. Oh, close enough. Okay, and then I'm going to move this light so that hopefully it's better lit. Okay, so this is these are the foundation pieces. Okay, really quick and easy. But this is what, let me see, this way or that? There we go. I can move this further back. I'll turn it upside down so it's right side up for you. So this is what the foundation paper piecing template looks like. The first thing you're going to want to do is print out 4 of these, and then you want to cut this out on the dotted line. This is your seam line, your cutting line, and then your sewing line. And then you're going to tape this piece onto the end of the triangle. If we were making a smaller block, we wouldn't have to do that, but since this is a 12.5-inch raw block, we have to go ahead and tape that on. Okay? Now, once you do that, you cut the whole thing out. Now, I realized after I had cut mine out for the demo here that I hadn't put the numbers on. The one that's ready for you has the piecing order numbers on it, but the ones I'm going to be showing you don't. So don't be surprised when you go ahead and print. So I've taped that corner on, right? And I have 4 of them. So they're going to look like this. And I really recommend you do this. I recommend that you take all 4 of them and lay them out. It doesn't matter that their seam allowances are there, because all I'm looking for is what's my through line on the color. Because you're going to have the big triangle, and then you're going to have this little triangle that'll be the same fabric. That's how we get the interwoven part, okay? And so pick any one, doesn't matter. You put A, that's fabric A, and here is going to be A. B, B, C, C, D, and D. Everything else is background. So I'm going to put an X because we have a B here. And now you're ready to go. At this point, what you need to do is take your fabrics and find the 4 you like when they're next to each other. So what I did is I laid them down, and I didn't exactly interweave them, but I sort of did so that all 4 were together, and I could see how each looked against the others that it was up against. So, how does this one look with this fabric that goes this way? And how does it look with this fabric? Now this is a little less important, but it's still really good if you double check how do these look together, because they are right next to each other. Again, because of the camera, the value is harder to tell here. A lot of people like to do this with red, green, yellow, and blue, or something like that, where they're really bold colors and you can't mix them up. If that's what you decide to do, maybe go into some oranges or some red tones. That would certainly work well, but in this case, I went with all yellow. So pick what you like, and then say, okay, this is going to be A, and I would mark it like on a post-it note, or you could put 1 pin for A, 2 pins for B, 3 pins, 4 pins, just in the end of the fabric, so you know which ones you're dealing with. And it's quite simple from there. This is standard paper piecing. It doesn't get any easier than this. So what I would recommend, and I will walk you through it real quick in case this is your first time. Some people have told me that I tend to assume that that people know more than they might when they come on here. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through this really quickly. When it comes to this piece here, this is the finished size. So you're going to need a scrap of fabric that is bigger than this triangle. And actually, you're going to put it on the other side. So an easy way to take care of that, the first step is to actually fold on all of the sewing lines. That'll make it easier to see from the other side, and it'll be easier to tear it off later. So I just did this one. Now I realize that when I'm folding this, I'm going through this other piece. That's perfectly fine. Now I'm going to fold on the long one. This one I'm going to want to lay down for, because it's just so much longer. Okay, and then crease. Now I'm going to do this again in 2 weeks when we're back, but on the back side, this is A, and on this you can see that that's number 1. Okay, this is the first one you're going to put on. You're going to put it on this spot, right side up. So your good side up. All the other pieces are going to go face to face or good side down, however you want to think about it. So your fabric piece has to be bigger than this, okay? Then you're going to take fabric 2, making sure that you're overlapping properly, and put it on and then fold it over. Sorry, fabric 2 based on your map here is going to be this one, okay? This is going to be fabric 2. This is a background piece, right? So you'll put that one on. Hold it, let me draw this line, it might be easier. Obviously, it'll be straight when you sew it. Okay, this one here is number 3. And this one is number 4. I did it right upside down. Yeah. Okay. Piece 1 will go on. Now, one thing you can do, in fact, I usually fold this both directions. Let me do that real quick because it'll make it easier to tell. Once you've glued this down, and do not glue it for all eternity. I just used a simple glue stick. Washable school glue. Okay? Works great. It doesn't have to be Elmer's, but that just is the brand I have. I put a little dab in each corner, just enough to hold the fabric in place. Then what you can do is fold the paper over, the fabric will be sticking out, trim it at the 1/4 inch. Fold, trim, fold, trim, and then when you go to lay down piece 2, you'll know right where it goes because the the cutting line will be here, and you'll line the 2 of them up, and then you'll sew on this line. Now, this gets complicated because you're flipping your paper back and forth. There is a way to do this from the front side, but I have found that most people, if they haven't done this before, have a harder time of it. So my fabric will go here. I will turn this over and sew on this line between 1 and 2. And then trim, trim, trim. Number 3, I'll put, you always double check that it's going to fit. Then you fold it back, you line it up on the raw edge here, you flip it over, you sew on the sewing line, you fold it back and press, and then this will all be done, and then you do number 4. And number 4, this line doesn't exist. Sorry. This is the one where the fold is there, but the cutting line isn't. And so this is all just one big triangle that gets put on last. It probably sounds more complicated than it is. Like I said, we're going to do this live in 2 weeks, and I think that that'll make more sense. So I recommend that you come back then, or you watch the video. All of the lives stay up. I haven't taken any of them down, even the ones that were horrible. So, because I'm not doing edited content, I want to leave all those lives up there for you. So you'll be able to go back and look at this again and that again and put the 2 together, and it should be a lot easier. Okay? But I have been asked if we can do this as a sew-along type of thing. But since I'm revealing the block today, I know none of you have your fabric ready to sew it with me. So we can sew it together next time. But this is incredibly easy construction. I did at the end have my seams open when I put the 4 big triangles together. I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can. You don't have to, but it does lead for a flatter block. It's all in the instructions. Okay? So this is a very simple one to do, no matter whether you're doing foundation paper piecing, if you're doing it with English paper piecing, or you're just deciding to mark on your templates and sew on the lines. Really pretty simple. The last 3 blocks for the year are all take this square, sew it to that, cut it to this, etc. There will be no templates for the last 3 blocks, which should make it a lot easier for those of you who are not template fans. I did try this year to put a little bit of everything into it, so if you like English paper piecing, there's a little bit of that, there's a little bit of template work, there's a little bit of just regular old block sewing. The next block is going to be another simple one, and then we get a little bit more complicated for September, and then October we're going to have Y seams. So I'm hoping that it'll be challenging enough for those of you who haven't done this before without driving you insane. It's really not that hard. A lot of times people, when it comes to Y seam, they get themselves all knotted up and they get nervous, and it's really quite simple to do. And I'm going to show you how to do that. But that'll be our October block. That leaves us with November and December for doing sashing if you want sashing, quilting, and binding, and label, all of that. Um, Last year we did a mystery quilt, and I built those days in earlier, but because we were doing the 9 blocks and we're doing them both sessions of the month, that's why it's going to be a little bit more compressed at the end. So hopefully that's okay with everybody. But with Thanksgiving and things like that, a lot of you told me last year you wound up having to go back in order to finish anyway. But in October or November, I'm also going to put out the survey for next year, where I'll be asking, what kind of a quilt do you want for next year's annual quilt? Yes, Donna, there's 9 blocks. So we have 5 so far, and this one's number 6. So we have August, September, and October are the last 3 blocks. So this year, you guys wanted more of a block of the month, and we picked the star theme. You voted on that. The year before was a mystery quilt, and the year before that was a orphan quilt for old 4-patches of all various sizes. So look for that in October or November, and you'll be able to vote for what we work on next year, because we've got a nice wide variety going here. If people are interested in additional blocks, I did have other ones I thought about doing for this year, which would make it a 12-block quilt. But some of those were either incredibly close to what I already had, or it would be another 2 sessions in order to be able to go through it and demo it. And there just aren't that many months in the year when we need time for some of the other stuff. So I apologize that it's only the 9. If you want more, send me an email at mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com, and maybe I'll put out a bonus set of instructions for additional blocks. But since stars are so popular, I'm not so sure that in the next couple years we won't be doing whole new stars anyway. I will say that next month's is similar to a block we've already done. It is slightly different, and so I thought it was different enough. But, for example, one of the blocks that I replaced with that one was another one like the last one, where it had the diamonds that were free floating in the middle, and there were 8 of them. And that just seemed too much like the 2 before, so I intentionally took that one out. That was the Eastern Star block. But I have tons more options if people want them. So just let me know. But start thinking now, what would you like to see for next year? If you want another mystery quilt, then that takes me more time this year to have ready to go next year, which is why I have to ask so early. I would say voting is going to have to be done no later than the end of November for me to have a shot for something like a mystery quilt for January. So that's why I want to do it early, because that was pretty popular last year. It was not so much actually a mystery quilt as it was a mystery block, but overall I thought that it went well, and people, some of you that are on here have told me that you liked them. So the interwoven star is our block for this month, and again, it's going to be an easy one. It should take you less than an hour probably to do it once you've chosen your fabric and you've decided where the pieces are going, because it's such a quick sew. And you'll see that next month if you don't want to do it until then. Okay, if this is your first time here, please feel free to use the chat. I really love it when people go ahead and ask questions. You can ask any sort of a question you want. My general rule of thumb is the only question I don't answer are the ones that would make my husband blush. He also doesn't like talking about money. So those 2 things. Other than that, we can talk about anything you want to talk about. I will say probably politics is not a good choice these days, because we all know that people are very polarized on that. But that has been a huge topic of conversation for a lot of people. So there you go. If you are working on something and you've run into a problem, even if it's not now, if you want to send me a question but you don't want it to be here in the chat, you can email me at the mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com email. I'll be happy to look at whatever it is you're working on, and maybe give you some tips. Also, if you have an organizing question, maybe it's about your garage, and you send that to me, I will either respond back to you by email if it's something that's kind of a one-off, or if I think it's something other people might be interested in, I will let you know that I will be doing it here. I've had a lot of people who have asked me questions about their sewing rooms, or about how to track their quilts, or how to spin the seams on a 4-patch, that because I've talked about it here, they want to know more, and so I will do that here, so that everybody gets to see it. Now, because this is also live, and each live is an hour, some stuff gets repeated. There's just some things that keep coming up, and so I will show them again, simply because I know somebody isn't going to want to look through 50 hours of video to try to find a quick little tip. There is a chance in the future that I will be doing edited content, but that is all going to depend on what's going on in the rest of my world. And this year has gone completely out of whack. For those of you who know me, you've already heard that my husband was diagnosed in January with cancer. He has had his hopefully last chemo. They said that he's in remission. So we're still wearing masks everywhere because his immune system is down and he's anemic. So he's still really tired. But we're getting closer and closer to a normal life every couple of days, it seems. He's got a little bit more energy, etc. But that put a serious hurt on my schedule. So there's that. Plus, I do travel quite a bit. I'm going to be going to Indianapolis in August, and then in September, I'm flying to Albuquerque, then to Minneapolis, Minnesota, then probably, this is not locked in yet, but probably to St. Louis, Missouri, and home in 2 weeks. That'll be 3 conventions in 2 weeks. So there's going to be a lot of work in prep for that, and then I can guarantee you that I'm going to be wasted along the way. And one of those conventions is where I'll be doing, hopefully, a live stream from. That'll be a short one. And I'll warn you about it in advance, and I'll warn you at the beginning it's going to be a short one. But that's going to make a difference too, which is another reason why I'm trying to get things done in advance. I just sewed and wrote the instructions for the September block this week. So I'm trying to get done in advance so I have time to do things like creating the surveys and doing more of the sewing to be able to show you and have stuff prepped and ready to go. I still have not heard from the kids what they want in terms of a wedding quilt. I offered them 2 options, that they could either have a regular bed quilt with either a traditional or more modern design, or I could do an album block quilt for them. They're getting married in February. The theme is Pokemon. My son is actually a Pokemon judge, so it's a decent part of their life. And so when I hear back from them, then I'm going to have to set aside time to sew, especially if it's the album block, to make sure I have those blocks ready for signatures in February. So that's why I'm trying to get ahead on the blocks of the month, so I have the time to do those. Because if I'm going to do them, I will probably be screening, not silk screening, I'll be printing Pokemon characters and then putting them onto the blocks and then having people sign them. So it means, taping them up and things so people don't sign in the seam allowances and things like that. So there's quite a bit that's going to be going on with that. I might even go so far as to actually assemble the whole top. And then wherever people sign, it doesn't matter if it goes from block into block because it's all the one thing. But it's going to take a chunk of time. So there's that coming up. I do have, I still have 3 custom quilts that I'm working on. Those have to be done by mid-November because those are going to be Christmas gifts. And if I can get them done before that, so much the better in order for there to be time for quilting. For those of you who are new, because I know we did get a couple of new subscribers in the last month, when it comes to quilting, I love to piece. I'm not so great at quilting. I've done some quilting stuff on here. So if somebody's getting a custom quilt from me and they want me to quilt it, I will do that. But I only have a domestic. I have a Janome Memory Craft 6500, which is the professional grade, that I bought used at least a decade ago, so it's not top of the line. So I will do that kind of quilting if people particularly want that. But if they want something really nice, then I will refer other quilters. And so I will warn the quilt. We'll talk about who they want to have quilt it, and I will let the quilter know when to expect it so that the client's already on the queue before the top is even done. And so I will tell the quilter, I will have it ready for you by this date. And even if I'm sewing all night, the 3 nights before, it's going to be there. It's going to be ready. It's going to be flat. It's going to be ironed. It's going to be ready for the quilter on that date. So I know that I have until mid-November for some people. There's also some people who just want me to piece tops for them and then they do the quilting themselves, and that's fine too. So, given everything, if you notice that the bags under my eyes come down to here, please be kind. But things are getting under control, and especially with Scott feeling better, it takes a little bit of the pressure off. But we used to have maids come every month and do all the heavy cleaning, the bathroom, scrubbing the floors and all that, and I haven't had anybody since January. And he hasn't been able to do it because it used to be his job. So you know who's tired of cleaning. And whose house is not as clean as it should be? Mine. But I am a professional organizer, I mentioned that, and it's been busy on that side too. We have gotten a bunch of people in as assistants for the summer, which is great. And we've been getting a lot of calls. I've had 3 initial assessments in the last 2 days. 4, because I had 3 yesterday and 1 today. 4 assessments in 2 days, and we got all the jobs. So now I'm scrambling because for some reason my staff seems to think that they have a right to take vacations. That I should be perfectly fine with them taking off a week in the summer to go and do family stuff. I have no idea where they get this idea, mind you. I went 13 years without a vacation, which was not good for me, and I know it wasn't good for me. But I will bring that up and say, you haven't even done 10. What's going on? You don't really need a vacation. But no, realistically, I love it when my team is happy. So it's being a bit of a challenge, but that's okay. I'm happy to have it. But yeah, so kind of everything is running full bore right now. So, again, with the Grandmother's Flower Garden, you may not see very many popping up next time. What I try to do is show you how many I've done since the last time, and then I'll move them over here to the wall with the rest of them. But I am pleased that we're doing okay and things are catching up. The sewing room reorganization has come to a screaming halt because of everything else. Plus, I have decided that I am not going to take the small room and keep the larger extra room as a guest room. I'm going to make my guests sleep in the small room, and I'm taking the larger one as my sewing room extension. I'd been mentioning it here, and every single one of you that replied back to me said, take the big room and make them sleep on the floor if they have to. It's your room. No, no one will have to sleep on the floor. Even the small room has room for a queen size bed in it. Not much more, but it does have room for a queen size and a couple of end tables. And realistically, when I have a guest, they're not using closet space very much. They don't need a lot of other things. There's a little dresser in there, so they have everything that they need. It's a very pleasant little room, but it is small. But I'll be using the room next to me because that's where things like the Acu cutter is going to go, and other things that I used to keep downstairs. But my son has still not moved his stuff out of that room yet. So until the bed leaves and a bunch of other things, I can't put in the shelving. So I'm like, come on. But at this point, yeah, it'll happen when it happens. It's perfectly fine. But he was supposed to have been moving things out the beginning of the year, but of course he couldn't come over because of Scott. So we're behind on all of that kind of stuff too. But now that Scott is getting better, we're starting to see the kids more, which is good, because we only saw them once. They came over because we were talking about some legal stuff. And so they came over once in 6 months. So I'm very happy that they were able to come, here in June. Let me see here. Donna. Finished my blue-yellow quilt top that I started in 2017. I have 8 to quilt. Any ideas where to start? Okay. Great idea for sewing room. Okay, so I've been asked this question before. When I have 800 projects, how do I pick which one's next? Okay? Now, for me, I have a spreadsheet. I've shown that here, but if people want, I can show it again. It has a lot more quilts on it now. One of my first questions is, what has a deadline? So, for example, if I need to have the quilt blocks ready for February for the wedding, that takes priority. That gets number one, because that's the first thing that has a real deadline, other than my commission quilts. So I'm ignoring that. If it was just me personally, right? I would look at it and say, okay, what has a deadline? Then I would look at it as, I have these tops that I've sewn, but do I still want to make the quilt? Is it worth my time to quilt it, or is it worth quilting by check? Are these charity quilts? Because with a lot of charity quilts, there's a bunch of long armors that will be willing to quilt them for free. So if I can hand it off because it's a charity quilt to somebody, that takes it out of my stash, off my to-do list, and it gets the quilt onto somebody and keeps them warm. So that's an option. Now in my case, I do have a bunch of different things with timelines. I have the blocks of the month. I have the potential wedding quilt. I have the 3 commission quilts, right? So that's 5 quilts, not to mention a couple that I really like to get done, so I could give them for Christmas presents, right? But that's 5 quilts that have hard deadlines. So I'm going to pick where I am on these quilts. So how do I choose the priority on these 5 quilts? I look at, is it handwork or machine work that I need to do? Because handwork I can do downstairs while I'm watching TV with my husband. But machine work has to be here in the studio. And what time I have here is limited. Let's assume it's all machine quilt. Okay, it's all machine work. Out of those, I will look at what's the closest to being finished. Well, first, it's still which one comes first in terms of the deadlines. But if I have something that's close to being finished, I'll knock it out. Even if it's the 2nd or 3rd due date. Because if I can spend 1 or 2 days and finish something and get it off my plate, I will. Okay? So let's say I was doing the grandmother's flower garden quilt and I had 1 more row to add. That's going to take several days of hand sewing, but then it would be complete. It would be finished and I could move on. Oops, I'm sorry. So, due dates first. If it's going to be a quick finish, just knock it out. And then sometimes I will be working on 2 projects at the same time, because if I'm doing a quilt that has a million half square triangles that I have to sew because they're not in my drawer, I'll get tired of doing it, I'll get frustrated, and I'll get grumpy. So I will work on 2 quilts with similar deadlines at the same time that have different types of activities that I need to do for them, so that I get a break. Even if it's not the activities, if it's the colors. If I'm doing one that's basically red and white, and I have another one that's in cool tones like blue, green, and purple, then I'll alternate between the 2 of those. A, it gives my eyes a rest, which is very helpful. B, it helps keep me from being bored and getting sloppy, because that's the worst, is if you're just so done with this project and you're putting those pieces through and I'm not having fun with this anymore, that's when you're going to totally hose it. That's when you're going to make a strip set with one of the pieces the wrong direction, and then you're going to cut 40 half square triangles, and now it's upside down, so you either have to take it apart, or now I have to cut another strip set, but now I've got all these half square triangles that are wrong. It's not worth it. You gotta sew when you're in the zone. Now, everybody loses their zone every once in a while. Sometimes it's a short-term thing, a couple hour break and you're back on it. Sometimes you can lose your sewing verve for days or weeks or even months. It can happen. If you have a deadline for something, you still need to get it done. Build breaks into your sewing day. Put on some rockin' music. Put on something silly. I will often find that if I put on a really dumb old movie, it makes it easier. I tend to listen to science fiction fantasy when I'm listening to to books on tape, but I will occasionally listen to politics. I'll occasionally, right now I'm listening to Jane Eyre. Jane Austen. It's a 45-hour compilation of all of her works, so that's what I've got on my phone right now. But if I'm losing my zip, then I'll put on something like Animaniacs or Weird Al or whatever. Tom Lehrer. He sang a lot of silly songs. Just to break it up, give me something fun to do, something with a nice beat, something that's going to make me laugh, because that helps get me back in my zone. That is when to move to another project. Oh yeah, when you're out of it, you can switch projects. That can help, but sometimes you'll find that you can get deep enough in the I don't care zone, which is not where you want to be in this case, that none of the projects look good. So, taking a walk. Right this time of year, go to a lazy river and float around a lazy river. Get completely away from your sewing, and then relax and don't think about any of them, and then come back when you're fresh again. I do needlework as well as doing quilting, so every once in a while I will get out a cross stitch and I'll work on that for a little bit, because it's a different motion, it's a different way of sitting. It's in a scroll frame that I can put under my leg. It's cross stitched, so it's a completely different motion. That's been helpful when this has not been working lately, because I can just do this with this hand, needle down, needle up, through the Aida cloth, and it's not as painful on this thumb. So different kinds of projects. Maybe this is the time if you're not in the zone, you decide to paint your bathroom. Okay? Something very different can help you reset and be ready to tackle those projects again. So that is what I would say. If I was sitting here and I had 8 quilts to quilt, number one, do I have to quilt them? Okay, can I either give them to somebody who will quilt them for free? Can I quilt by check? If the answer is no, I have to quilt them, then I will quilt them, but I will do them in priority order, and then I will try to make sure that I'm mixing and matching. Now, when it comes to quilting specifically, as opposed to tops and things like that, it's harder to switch between because it takes a little bit to get back into the groove of how you're doing the motions. And so if I go from doing a swirly thing to an angular thing, then I'll need to have a little piece on the side where I can get back into the swirly zone before I get back onto the quilt. Or I'm going to have some very sharp curves. Okay? So keep that in mind as well if you're switching projects. Is there anything else? Nope, I think that's it. So hopefully that's helpful. One thing you might want to do actually is if you have 8 projects as opposed to 8 quilts to quilt, if you can alternate a quilting project and a piecing project, that can help you stay more in the zone as well. Because you don't get so bored piecing because you're doing some quilting, but you also don't get as bored or as tired. Because this can get really tiring, right? Pushing the quilt through. That having something small you can just run through the machine real quick can let the muscles relax. Because we almost all hunch like this. We're like gargoyles on the top of the building while we're sewing. So if I can go from having this big thing that I'm doing to something where I can sit up and I can just put those pieces through, the posture will help, and it will help me just recenter. Okay. Ah, that's right. I forgot you were in Michigan. I have a whole bunch of cross stitch that I do. It's counted cross stitch with wizards and dragons. I told you I do science fiction fantasy in my books. I cross stitch wizards and dragons a lot. And I have a scroll frame that has an arm that goes down, and then there's a piece that goes under my leg, so the frame floats. And so I have my 2 hands on opposite sides, and I can stitch a lot faster. But what I also do, which I know a lot of people don't do, is I take the original pattern and I Xerox it, or copy it, or scan it, however you want to say it. And as I go, I color in what I've stitched. It makes it much easier later to find where I was. The first time I did it, I was afraid to color on the pattern because I only had the original, and I didn't want to mess it up. And so I would have to keep having to count down and over and where am I, etc. Whereas if I had it colored in, you're going to have this weird shape like this, and now, oh, well, that part, now I can fill in the part underneath, and I colored it. So if you like to do cross stitch, that's just something to think about. I have some other projects going on that are more house related. We've had the handyman in to some extent success. So, some repairs have been made, which is good. This is all stuff that just kind of sat by the wayside forever. So, for example, my drain pipe used to go 12 feet out into the middle of my yard, but it got a clog. And so it wound up getting cut off about a foot from the house. And it's from my sump pump. And I have a high water table where I am. And it dug a hole 18 inches square and about as deep in my backyard, just the water coming out of it whenever the sump pump would run. So, gargoyles. So I actually had it where it's being run down into this box, and then the box goes out to drain tile in a couple of different places in my backyard, so I'm causing less damage. But supervising all of this and getting it all done has just been another thing on the list. I still need to empty, drain, wash, and refill the hot tub. Not that we need a hot tub right this moment, but it is one of those things where Um, it needs to get done. So it's going to be another thing on the list. So I'm slowly but surely ticking things off, but they're in 8 million different categories. So some of them are quilting, some of them are household, some of them are repairs, some of them are travel things. So there's an awful lot of them there. Okay, I can't quite see what this says. Oh, yeah. Um, you can, if you don't know what Donna's talking about, they make double-ended needles. So there's, hold on. There we go. There's a point on both ends, and the thread goes in the middle. So you can just bring the needle down, move it over, and put it up without having to flip it over, which is really handy. Um, but you can wind up getting some more snags, so you have to pay attention to the thread itself. If you are trying to sew like regular things with sharp double-ended needles, you're going to poke yourself pretty good at some point. I'm just warning you now. I do know people who like to do the stabbing kinds of quilting um, with the double-ended needles, but I have not been as successful with that. I don't rock either. I do the poke and stab kind of method by hand quilting, um, because my rocking, I can never get it even top and bottom. So I know, practice, practice, practice. And when I have time, I will. But until then, I'm just going to poke. Um, but I do know people who use those. And since you're not rocking, you don't have to worry about having pliers nearby to pull the needle through. I know a lot of people who put like 4 or 5 stitches on, and then they can't actually pull the needle through the quilt, and so they grab a pair of pliers and they yank it out that way. I think I'm probably just as quick if I'm doing my poking method, because I'm only doing the one at a time, and then I'm just pulling the thread through. So I could be wrong, but that's the way I look at it. So there you go. There's all kinds of weird needles out there too. There's the self-threading needles. I don't have success with those, but I know some people who do. Whenever it comes to this sort of thing, my recommendation is you borrow one from somebody and you try it and see if you like it before you buy in. Needles are not that expensive if you buy cheap needles. I bought some needles in London, which cost me, I think it was $1.50 each. But England and Germany make the best needles in the world. And you get a lot less thread fraying and things like that with it. So it was worth it to me. But until you decide what you want, that can be expensive quickly, because they come in packs of like 25. So you're dropping a good amount of change on needles, and if you don't know if you like them, then what do you do with them? Okay, so it is almost time to go. I do like to respect your time. If you stuck it out the whole time, thank you. If you're new, even better, thank you for putting up with me. So again, next time, this way. We're going to sew this together. So go ahead and get your templates printed out, or your paper piecing templates printed out, and we'll do this together next time. Any questions, mail at StashBlasterQuilts.com. And thank you so much for coming, friends. I truly appreciate it. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. Okay? Take care. Bye-bye. Oh, it still says I'm going live. Hold on. Well, if you're still here with me, I apologize. What is going on here?